Hello, English 322 students. This is Dr. Martin again. This brief introduction is for Gene Toomer's book Cain, which was published nearly 100 years ago. Um, what you're reading are snippets done by a Southern black writer. Well, he's basically from Washington, D.C., who went to Georgia to teach and soaked up the folklore, race, culture, and everything there. And so much of Cain feels autobiographical from Gene Toomer's trip down there in the 1920s and his subsequent publication of it. The book is, in my opinion, brilliant. I've read and taught it for years, and I'm so glad you get a chance to read it. You're reading snippets. The snippets are basically magazine pieces that he had published separately. So if you read like Corintha or Blood Burning Moon, which I think I assigned to you, or you read Seventh Street, they were published in separate journals, separate magazines, and then he collected them for the crux of what you read now as Cain. These pieces are short, they're manageable. It's one long, I'd call it a novella or a mixed genre piece because it has a play that ends it called Cadmus. But these are short pieces. These are not difficult pieces to read and to understand. There are a couple main things that I'd like you to get from Cain. Cain, of course, would be Cain and Abel from the Bible, the brothers, the fratricide, that kind of thing, as well as sugarcane, right? So we're talking about sugarcane and the crops in Georgia, which are very similar to the ones we have in Louisiana. So you kind of have that interesting element of it. But the thing I'd get from it, I don't have the book electronically. I don't want to keep flipping back and forth. But when you read the language, it's rich, it's incantory, it's repetitive, and it's experimental. This is how we equate it with modernist fiction, that he's playing with or experimenting with prose, syntax, language constructions. You can call him, on one level, like the African-American lit equivalent of Ernest Hemingway or something like that, who's playing with prose, who's trying to experiment, though he doesn't economize his language like Hemingway. But the things that I really want you to focus on and ask you for some questions this week would be, how do you read the poetry in relation to the prose? I think he's putting the pieces together purposefully in order that he had collected, right? So you start with Corintha, you start section 2 with 7th Street. How do you read the November Cotton Flowers, I think that's the name of it, into the subsequent section on Esther? The flowers in the poem are blooming. Esther's sexuality towards Bartho is blooming in the section named after her. And so you kind of got this connection between the two. Maybe there's something about that. Most of the poems are about black workers in the fields, reaping the cotton, the sugarcane. They're using scythes. This is like a farming book, right? It feels like a farming book. You're in rural Georgia, 100 years ago. It takes you there. You could feel the language. You could feel the atmosphere. It's really, really powerful. So how the poetry connects with the prose, right? So we've got that. Does it connect with it? Are these two separate things? Heck, 7th Street, that's the first section of section 2, has poetry within the prose. So you've kind of got a lot going on there. The second thing I was asking is about how you rate the southern sections versus the northern sections. I have a mix of readings that you're doing from the southern to the northern. The last one from the southern is Blood Burning Moon. The first one from the northern is 7th Street, which is set in Washington, D.C. The transition to the northern sections is often social conflict. Being around whites more, right? You get a few white people in the first part, but you don't really get that many whites. But these are in black sections of Washington, D.C. and Chicago. Many of the protagonists in the northern section are males who desire women, just like the southern section, but simply don't fit into a dating schematic or something like that. Bona and Paul is a fascinating one, and it has two characters who are playing basketball against one another. Paul is rumored to be a light skinned black, and that was what Gene Toomer was in his own life, dating Bona, a white young female at school. So you've kind of got interesting elements of passing, racial passing going on as well. Um, the northern sections are much busier. There's imagery still from the South. One recurring image throughout cane is smoke. It's cane smoke when you're burning cane. You live in Louisiana. You don't need me to explain that to you. Um, but it's the idea that you're kind of get this sense of the smoke from the South is also there in the North. So you look at elements there. There's religious imagery throughout, there's racial tension throughout. There are some difficult sections, including Blood Burning Moon. There's racial language throughout. Often it's a fellow African American calling one another the N word, right? So it's not the way that it's used in a racist way now. The context is slightly different, is what I'm trying to say. But this piece, like there's themes of pregnancy, there's virgin birth, there's ecstasy, people in religious ecstasy, sexual ecstasy. The male narrator in the southern sections often desires um, the females that he's describing. He goes for walks with them and so forth. And they sometimes go into these religious ecstasies and all of that. It's very interesting. Like it's a very, very interesting book. I find his language just completely incantory, poetic, and lovely. Um, Keep in mind that Toomer, who was black but light skinned and from Washington, D.C., would have stood out going to rural Georgia. And many of these pieces have a person courting another person, and the male stands out. He doesn't fit in exactly. They would have known, the Southern folks he was around, that he was an outsider. So you've kind of got that going on as well. Um, Anything else to mention about it? There's not a traditional ending. It's not a novel. It ends with Cadmus, and that was going to be the central part of this piece. It is a play. I don't expect you to read that. I don't expect you to read this book in its entirety. Look at the snippets. Give me your general impressions for your post this week. Remember, it's Southern Lit, so you've got Christianity, you've got race, you've got a little bit of the Confederacy, not so much, and you've got really wonderful, rich, almost hallucinatory portrayals of the natural realm. So Southern Lit is marked by those four things. Good luck reading it. Take care.